Coach Andrea Grove-McDonough, welcome to the Running Effect podcast. How are you doing this afternoon?
Good. Thanks for having me. Excited about being here.
First question for you, off the top of my head. We're in March here, and I feel like, NCAA indoors just happened, and we're kind of in this interesting transition between indoor track and outdoor track. What's that transition look like for you and your program?
Well, especially given that we didn't have any athletes at the NCAA indoor, it kind of in some ways buys us this training advantage. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'd certainly rather be there, with athletes competing. But, the upside to it is I phrase it, I call it March Madness, like it's our March Madness, like an opportunity for us to reset a little bit, certainly emotionally coming off the conference meet. But we get a really great block of training in during this phrase. And somewhere along the way, I phrased it as March Madness in, because it works obviously with literal March Madness going on. And so that's kind of how we've looked at it. And we kind of, I like that there's no pressure of any imminent competition. You sort of get through that towards the end indoor, right? You got, everyone's trying to hit a mark at BU or wherever they're going. And then you're trying to, you got conference and maybe you're chasing, indoor. And you get to have this like really nice lull and just focus on training and regroup. And we actually have spring break during that period as well. We just came off it. And I love that because we keep our athletes here training. But it's again that opportunity to like kind of spend time together, just training. Like I do a lot of like cookouts and that kind of stuff. And I just think it really helps us all reset.
You said spring break, and I was actually going to ask you whether your athletes stay or go. And I saw a video this morning of Coach Mike Smith, and it was like a workout video. It was Nico Young, his first workout after NCAAs. And in his speech to the team before the workout started, he's like, a lot of NCAA athletes are in Miami or wherever. He's like, our spring break is at Buffalo Park, which is where they do their threshold sessions, which made me laugh. What's this kind of unique period like where they don't have classes? They get to be like pro runners for a week, experience what it's like.
Love it. Like I always say, my favorite time of year is, kind of that last month of the year, outdoor track. I mean, I just love outdoor because they're done with classes. We get done really pretty early here. And then, yeah, we're just, we have this more time, even after practice, even for me, like sitting around, talking about the session or just honestly kind of goofing around a little bit. I just really love that time, with the team and spring break gave us that opportunity. Like, we don't have to worry about the stress of traveling, and trying to, be in an Airbnb or be in a dorm or whatever it might be. Right. If you do go away to spring break. So yeah, it's like they're sleeping in, they've got all this time before their double or their next session. We're able to meet more often, we're maybe meeting, both the morning and the afternoon. And then honestly, we're getting an opportunity, like I said, I think spending time together. I know I've mentioned that a couple of times, but I really think it's important not only for your team's camaraderie, but really for the coach athlete relationship, which I think is pretty important.
Yeah, going more into that, I think that's something I haven't talked to too many coaches about, the aspect of what they're doing when they're not at practice and facilitating, uh, you know, opportunities to hang out with the athletes, to have the athletes be with each other when it's not at practice. Can you kind of speak to that and creating different, cookouts, as you were saying, or different opportunities to hang out when it's not about practice and running fast and running hard?
Yeah, like I'm a big advocate about having the athletes, if you can, if your situation allows for it, like to my home. I live close to campus, have a great big huge front yard, and I just like integrating my family and my environment. I think it's nice sometimes for the younger athletes to have an opportunity, to kind of be in someone's home and be hanging out. But I also think it's important, like, you have athletes in the dorm, and they spend a lot of time together and they tend to eat together and they'll go for runs together. And then you have your athletes that are, yeah, off campus in apartments and in houses. And I really like making sure, or I think it's important, right, that our upperclassmen and our younger athletes are interacting in a social setting outside of practice. And that seems to happen most uniquely and most appropriately, I guess, or it just sort of lends itself to those relationships forming is when we're doing it, away from a practice setting and when we're not traveling and racing.
Of course, from a, physical training standpoint, you're going to train a senior differently from a freshman or a fifth year differently from a freshman. But in terms of like team camaraderie and making someone, feel like they belong. What does that distinction in relationship look like for a senior that you've been with for 4 years versus a freshman who's coming into the college for the first time, has the added stress and pressure and all that? What do those kind of two different relationships look like?
Well, it's kind of interesting because some of it depends a bit on that recruiting process. I mean, there's been some athletes that you feel like you've recruited for so long before they made a decision. That you one of them is a scout, Karina James. I said to her, I felt like I knew her better than maybe some of the people on my own team by the time she got here. It was like I used to joke, it was like we were dating, we'd have this relationship that went on, forever. And so that was kind of can be a unique situation. But what happens here is we sometimes have younger athletes that have trained actually at a higher rate, maybe through high school or through their high school program. So we do sometimes have an overlap, right? We have a kid, that's maybe come out of a program that is running some kind of higher volume, and we don't hesitate to allow them to kind of jump in with where they're at. But I do think that it is a challenge because certainly right now there are athletes that have been with me for 5 years. And some of them are going to be here next year, right? So we've had 6 years together. I mean, there's just this natural flow, and we've got these inside jokes, and and honestly, we're pretty tight at that point. I mean, obviously, if they're still sticking around, they want to be here, and we have a good relationship. So I think that can be actually kind of hard because sometimes the younger athletes are saying, like, how do I get that? How do I have that relationship with coach that she has, say, with Madeline or Lou or so, and usually I tell them, I mean, that's just a product of time, right? Like any relationship, you just, tend to be around each other a lot. And again, I guess if they're still sticking around, we must click on some levels, and they get my, sense of humor or my quirks or whatever it may be. So, but I think it can be a bit intimidating, sometimes the younger athletes definitely, see that, and, kind of in a rush to get there. And we get there, I mean, almost all the time, right? But yeah, there's that's a bit, it can be a bit tricky, but again, I think we do a really nice job here of integrating, all the groups. And we have some high level freshmen that come in and they can run right away, with some of the older women. So we do have them together quite a bit.
7 minutes into this conversation, I can definitely tell you have this exuberant, fun spirit, and I understand why your athletes talk about you the way they do. I'm curious to hear about, is there a switch you flip when you have to and get serious? And how do you balance the fun side of Coach McDonough with the, okay, let's get serious, last rep of a workout or right before the race, we got to get serious?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny because I I have well, the first time somebody sees that side of me, especially if I'm irritated, like if all of a sudden I'm kind of coming at you with, like, a little bit of like, we need to get our shit together moment, it can be a little scary, or the first time I might text a kid and say, hey, we need to meet, let's meet in my office. That's a little, when I'm putting a formal setting to it, it can be a little intimidating. But I've kind of said this to recruits before, and to people, like, I generally think, you know, a lot of times practice just, ain't that serious, right? You're going out for an 8 mile run, you're going out for a 6 mile run. I mean, no one's curing cancer around here, So I just think I like the mood to reflect that. But we know when it's time for business, right? And they know. I always think I do an awesome job of hiding when I'm nervous. 2 years ago at Nutty Comb, like, I'm literally in my hotel room, like, immobilized. I'm thinking, oh my God, I can't move. I'm so nervous. And then I think I'm real cool, and I play it. But they are always like, we can tell, when it's, and I think that's important. We still tend to have a pretty loose environment. Our tent's definitely the one, that's got music on, and we're kind of, because I think you want to, replicate sort of the environment that you have, and keeping it loose. I always say, like, the athletes, they know, right? They wake up the morning of, like, the Nutty or like NCAs or a conference meet, you know, they know it's race day, right? The minute they open their eyes, their body is aware, it's game day. So I don't feel like I have to flip the switch too much. I think it's pretty natural. And I also know that different athletes respond differently, right? They want to, some of them love that intensity from me. I sometimes am the type who's like, I, I don't know if I should admit this, but I kind of swear a lot. And so sometimes, I'm like, all right, guys, let's get out there and kick their bleepity, you know what I mean? Or I might, that's when I'll kind of switch a little bit in that huddle at the last second and kind of say, hey, when you're rounding that last 400, I want you thinking about one thing, and that's F you, West Virginia, or whatever. So, like, that's kind of, I think, where they'll feel a little bit of, intensity. Certainly on the track, we usually have that one-on-one, maybe right before they walk out, where I'm giving them that final. Um, we do a good job though. I think it's just intuitive and natural. Like I said, we know when it's time to get down to business, and we do. And I was the same way as an athlete.
Let's talk about recruiting. You mentioned Karina James a minute ago, that process, how you guys knew each other so well by the time she came to the University of Toledo. As I was coming up in the sport, I remember Toledo got progressively better and better. And I remember Mile Split and all sorts of outlets started giving Toledo credit. And coming from a kid from Toledo, I was like, oh, this is great to see the programs up and coming. And I remember seeing some of the recruits, it may have been Karina's class, where it's like, I don't know how Coach McDonough is getting these people, but this is awesome. And then like on runs with people, or I would talk to different coaches in the NCAA. It was just like it seemed like everyone had an eye on you of like, how's she pulling this off? So without revealing all of your secrets, what are some of your keys to recruiting and getting some of the best kids in the country and even your own country to come run for you?
Um, Honestly, I think it really comes down to just authenticity. I do not have a different recruiting persona than what I'm like, and I'm real honest and upfront, and usually I say, look, like, I'll be honest with you, I'm not for everyone, right? Like, I am absolutely not the right fit for everyone. But if you end up coming here, whether it's Toledo or whether it was Iowa State or UConn or whatever it may be, like, what you see is what you get, and there's not really going to be a lot of surprises as far as I'm concerned. Um, so I think in recruiting, just being really authentic about who you are and kind of what you're all about. I know our athletes get this question a lot. Like, someone will be on a visit, or after their visit, they'll say, okay, but like, is she really like that? Like, in real, and usually they're like, yeah, she's really like that. So I tell them, like, look, you'll never wonder what I'm thinking, like, you'll know. If I'm frustrated, you're gonna know. If I'm like, girl, you need to get your ish together, I'm gonna like, um, yeah, I'd like to believe anyway that that's a part of it. And also, I believe people like to be a part of something, right? That feels bigger than themselves. And when I got here to Toledo, and my then assistant Nick Stenoff, I mean, we sat down. And I said, look, like, we've got to create the vision for what we believe this can be, and we've got to tell people it isn't about where we are right now; it's about where we're going. You know, I'd also like to believe that my track record at other institutions sort of have proved that I could do what I say I'm going to do. UConn's a great example. 21st or something in the region to 8th in the NCAA in 5 years. When everybody said UConn was where people went to run, distance runners went to die, is what I heard when I first got there. Like, um, I just, yeah, I think that authenticity piece is a big part of it. But I think, making sure you're creating a vision for people, and it feels honest and it feels real, um, and yeah, and it just, you know, making sure people know where you're going, and I always tell them, look, like, at the end of the day, we're going to be successful here, with or without you. Make no mistake. We're obviously recruiting you because you make it a little bit easier, and we'd love to have you. But I always say it's like dating, though. You know what? I want people who want me too, right? We want, nobody wants to go out with someone because they couldn't get a better date, or they asked somebody else out and they said no. So, okay, like, hey, like, we may not have all the bells and whistles of some of the, big schools out there, but our track's 400 meters like everybody else, and it is most importantly about relationships. We need to connect, and you need to believe in me as much as I believe in you. And if we have that, I just think the sky's the limit.
We can get into your time at other schools down the road in this conversation, but of course, incredibly successful at other programs before University of Toledo. You come to Toledo, and I feel like they were nowhere near where we see them today. What was that rebuilding process like for you? What were some of the things you were doing to rebuild the program? And ultimately, what was that first MAC championship win like after all the hard work started to pay off?
I mean, I think like anything, I think coaches will tell you the first year you take over any program is challenging simply because the athletes, you're not what they signed up for, and that's fair. I tend to have a really different personality a lot of times than, my predecessor, and that can be a little startling for people who aren't used to my energy and my, directness and, but yeah, I think the first time we won, this is going to sound, probably fairly obnoxious, but I mean, I expected it. I expected us to be successful. As a matter of fact, what bothers me more is that my second year we lost by like 2 points. That actually bugs me more. I don't even remember, to be honest, what I was thinking when we won the first time. I mean, I just think I that's what I thought we could do and would do and should do. And so, yeah, of course, it's fun to win championships, right? Conference meets, and also I was pretty fixated on looking beyond the conference, and I was really not shy about that. Our number one goal is making to the NCAAs, is getting to the NCAAs. Um, I tell this story a lot because I think it really epitomizes kind of what I'm about. But I told my athletic director when I got here that I would take this women's team to the NCAAs within 5 years or I'd quit. So, and he was like, whoa, pump the brakes. But I meant it. I mean, I meant it. I like to hold myself, I like to keep my feet to the fire and hold myself to that kind of standard. And that was number one, what I was trying to do. And I knew that conference meets would come as a result.
How important do you think it is to have that expectation of winning yourself so that the athletes realize it? It's like if you don't believe you're going to win, the athletes will know and they're already scared.
Yeah, I mean, I think they take a lot of cues from you, right? And I talk a lot about swag, and about, hey, like like this year, look, we came in here as conference champions, how we leave here is up to you, you know, and talked about how hard the athletes had worked to sort of turn things around and to get this program going and to get us on the map, and no one wants to be responsible for, letting that legacy slip, so we talk about pride, in the success of the program, and pride in being a part of that and having helped us build that, and built on in some ways on the backs of the women that signed on even when there was no necessarily evidence, but they believed, they believed in our vision, they believed in our staff, and they believed in each other. And so mostly it's rewarding them, right? It's rewarding those that were, well, not to be dramatic, but that were brave enough to maybe turn down some other schools that were a little bit sexier, or maybe had their resume and said, okay, like I'm in, when I'm in. And so it was really important to me on both a personal level and professional level to make sure that I did everything I could to make that happen, because that's what I promised people I would do. And so I take that seriously, right? That they believed me, yeah. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
No, it definitely does. We've mentioned some of the athletes that you recruited that are now on the team. And you just mentioned a minute ago how, some of these athletes turned down some of the sexier schools that were reaching out to them. I'm curious your thoughts on this. What do you think makes, the Toledo program stand out from those Power Five schools that have the big gear halls and have the big budgets and have the, super nice courses, whatever it might be? What makes Toledo special that you think makes these people want to join you?
Um, I hope, that it's that people by and large, the student athletes have had, a good experience, whether it's former athletes or current athletes. They say that, it was fun. Coach McDonough, kept it fun. And even when we were winning and even when we were doing all these things, I've always tried to present myself as, hey, look, I'm a female head coach coaching women, and that's important to me. I really don't, I don't want to diminish that. Like that's, I will say part of my side hustle, so to speak, is hoping that the young women that step on this campus, when they matriculate from here, 4 or 5 years from now, or six in some cases, whatever it may be, are leaving here as stronger, more confident young women. And that have helped. I will say I like to help people find their voice and then make sure they're not afraid to use it, right? So beyond just, we're trying to help you develop as an athlete, I always say, look, at the end of the day, there's no guarantee on how successful you're going to be athletically. But what I can guarantee you is I'm going to give you everything you give me. I'm literally going to lose sleep over it if things aren't going well or something. That's how important it is to me. We're going to have a ton of fun along the way because I truly believe that I don't care what level you're at, from pro down to high school. I know for me personally, when I was having the most fun collegiately and after college, I was running the best. So that's kind of the balance we try to strike here. We also promote, like, look, like, we're Toledo, like, the 419 is, like, was built on working class people, and I say that with love, right? Like we are gonna outwork people. We're not always this I say this over and over again. Look, we're not always gonna have the most talented team on the start line, but we will be the fittest and we will be the toughest, and as a result, we're gonna beat a lot of those teams. And I had this theme about you hear about the movie Boys in the Boat? Ever seen
Uh,
that?
I haven't seen the movie, but I read the book a few years ago, and it's one of the best books I've ever read. So I know the story very well.
So I took our whole team to see this movie because I had used this metaphor of rowing, right? And that we may not always have the strongest individual rowers, but if our 8 women in this boat are all rowing in the same direction and our oars are hitting the water perfectly synced, we're going to beat a lot of those boats because of it, right? And so that was and so when the movie came out, everyone's like, I couldn't go for some reason the first time that the team went, and it was over break, and they were texting me during the movie like, "Oh my God, you're gonna love this! Like, this is so you, and it's so much about what you talk about that, you know, it really needs to be about the greater good." And when we focus on the success of other, I think just 2 days ago, I met with our team, and I said, let's lean into the success of just the program, and that'll help your success individually. And remember that phrase, "Lift as you rise." Right? So as you individually start to achieve the things you wanted to achieve, look back and see if there's a teammate you can bring with you. And so I really love leaning into that, lift as you rise, right? That's me as a female coach in this business. Like, if there's new young coaches getting into it, Lindsay Kervois ran for me. She's at Wisconsin now. Her first coaching job was volunteer assistant for me at Iowa State. Like, we're still close and tight. And, I just think, bringing up other young women coaches into the business as well. That's part of the whole thing, lift as you rise. But that's something we talk about here a lot.
You mentioned a lot of the things you've shared with your athletes in this conversation. Where does the majority of that come from? Is it during practice, before the run, after the run? Do you have team meetings? Is it one-on-ones with the athletes? How are you generally communicating with your athletes and sharing these thoughts with them?
That's like all of the above. We definitely do team meetings, but I'm bigger on, like, this office has like a couch and chairs, and everywhere I've been, this is like a almost like a lounge, and sometimes I'm like, I have to get something done, but you know I really think it's important that this is an environment where they can just drop in, and sometimes we're talking about running and a lot of times we're not, right? We're talking, you name it, like, gosh, like, when I first started coaching, I had no idea that the job there's so much more to it. You're helping people run fast for sure, right? But, these are young people, right? It's a lot going on between the age of 18, 9 to 20 to 122, when you leave. And, so sometimes I'm just here talking off the ledge, or maybe there's been a breakup or like there's some drama, whatever it may be. But, yeah, I just think it's more the non-workout stuff that really generates these relationships.
I can tell you're someone who dreams big and backs it up with action. If you're willing to share, what's your vision for the University of Toledo? I know you, if I'm not mistaken, signed a contract through 2026. So, what's your vision through at least 2026, and what are some of the ways you want to elevate the program even more?
Um, this is easy, like, we wanna win. What does that mean? Well, we want to keep winning conference championships. We're looking up stats, like, how many, what's the most, anybody's ever won in a row, and how many is that? And how do we hit a little bit of a stumble this fall and came out winning that, and maybe we were down a few key players. And so that was something I was immensely proud of, because that one, didn't come as easy, as some of the others. And but we're really, really excited for what we have brewing, for next fall and what that looks like. And again, we're looking beyond just conference championships, like not only getting back to the NCAA, but now let's go there and make a little noise. What's the highest finish Toledo's ever had in their history? I believe it's 21st. So, that's something like, can we be a top 20 program? And then we sat down and said, I think we could be talking about being a top 15 program. And I think people are going to, I guess I don't really care how people react to that. That's what we're trying to do here. And I truly believe that we're going to make that happen. Um, I'm quite certain of it.
As you sit with me today, March 14th, 2024, what are some of the things that excite you the most presently?
Um, Gosh, that's a good question. I think it's, it excites me, but also like challenges me, is adapting to this generation of athlete that, comes in with a little bit more anxiety, I think, than we've seen in the past. A little bit more almost like self-doubt. I don't know if that's the nature. We could debate, philosophically about like why that may be. And so it's like learning how to tune into like how to help them, with that piece of it, and with that comparison thing that's going on. And obviously the sport is getting so fast and so elite, and that can be pretty intimidating. So it's also kind of tuning into like, you know, trying to focus in on your specific goal. They're all valid and worthy and they matter. So whether that's trying to, crack your first MAC lineup, or make your first indoor MAC championship, or score your first points, or that's make the NCAA regionals or make the NCAA, we're always trying to push the bar for people, to first and foremost, make sure your goals are appropriate for you, right? And that's, we just never want to diminish someone else's goals, right? If yours are the NCAAs and that's where we should be at, we're absolutely talking and planning and visualizing how we're going to help get you there. And yeah, we like to dream big with everyone, but we are always saying like, look, we might come up short, and that's okay. Like that's, what, we just want to be able to walk out of here literally or figuratively one way or another and say, look, at the end of the day, I did everything I could do, right, to maximize what that is. But so, back to, so what is excites me, I guess it's like continuing to learn how to adapt and how to evolve so that I can continue to be the coach I'd like to be, knowing, look, I'm not perfect, like, yeah, I'll be the first to tell you that, but it's listening and learning and adapting, to, I get older, and the athletes get younger, and sort of trying to tune into what this generation needs, and hoping I can keep providing as much of that as I can.
As someone who's been in the sport for many years at this point, has experienced many different programs, comparing that to present day, the day of the digital age, social media, Instagram, TikTok, all of that, what are some of the biggest shifts you've seen of an athlete 10 years ago versus an athlete today with all of social media's pressures?
I mean, I think athletes 10 years ago were just way more naive, right? Like they didn't know what, the school down the road was doing for training, or what their new uniforms looked like, or what their, or, just like in some ways access to that information can be great, because it's up the bar for people, and sometimes people are sharing about their own hardships and their own struggles with, self-doubt or anxiety, and that can be good, that can be reassuring. But I think this just ability to compare, and I call social media, whenever we're posting something on Instagram, it's like this joke on our team. I'm like, okay, let's put something up for the propaganda page. Like, I'm always telling them like, this is all lies. Like this, a lot of this is just propaganda. And, you're posting this photo about like this, everybody after practice, super happy, smiling, pick, but meanwhile, Sally had a bad day, was crying 5 minutes before that. And, and yada, yada. Like, I just think it's got people all, wrapped up in like that everything goes great for everyone else all the time. And just the comparison is just, it's been really hard on people from what I can see.
I think you've given back to the sport in many ways, but talking to you before this conversation, talking about some of the people you've been involved with in the sport, I would definitely say part of your legacy is the people you've elevated through their coaching roles. Coach Nick was under you, Coach Will Palmer was under you, who I didn't know that until you told me. Can you speak to some of the different awesome individuals you've gotten to work with and how cool it's been to see them, do their own thing in their own programs now?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I always go back to like Will was assigned to me to help be my assistant with the women's team, but work for Martin Smith for sure. At the end of the day, the poor guy had two jobs. He had to deal with me and he had to deal with Martin. Who, for the record, I have a lot of respect for it, enjoyed working for him. But um, yeah, I mean, it's so rewarding and exciting. My daughter was a flower girl at Will and Sam Palmer's wedding. I talked to them all the time, just yesterday, both of them. And I'm just immensely proud of them. I mean, um, gosh, I mean, to see what it was Sam ran for me at Iowa State also. Just seeing the way what they're capable of, what they're doing. I mean, I'm their biggest fan and cheerleader and love seeing them succeed. I love seeing coaches that I've worked with or worked for me or worked with me go on to do even better things than I've done. And seeing Nick in this role, it's like I'm like a mom, I was like, really proud of what he's doing there. And again, I have so much faith and belief in what he's going to be capable of. And, had Matt Valley with me for a couple of years. He went on to Villanova. He's doing awesome things to help that program and excited for him. Lindsay at Wisconsin. I just talked to yesterday. Like I tend to stay in pretty close touch with a lot of the people I work with. It's just I'm really proud of it, to be honest. And they're on their way to becoming far better coaches probably than I am. And I think that's awesome. I love it. Love everything about it.
For those that don't know, you were a stud athlete yourself back in the day. You ran for the University of Minnesota, and if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong here. You placed as well as fifth in the 1500 at NCAA, so you were quite the athlete. Take me through those years as an athlete and your own experiences in the sport.
Well, I wish my former coach was listening to this, Gary Wilson. We called him Wills. I was a hot mess for like the first, like, I think that's actually helped me as a coach because it didn't come so easy, right? Like I was highly recruited in high school, kind of a big shot, think I'm, gonna roll into the Big Ten, and just, you know, kick everyone's ass. And that's not what happened at all. I really, really struggled with the transition, out of high school, especially in the Big Ten, where you're just, good Lord, right? At that point, Peter Teagan, Wisconsin women were just rolling, Michigan women rolling. Like it was just, yeah, it took me more than a couple of years to really figure it out. And but importantly, what I tell the athletes all the time, but you know what I didn't do? I didn't blame anyone else, right? I didn't blame my coach, I didn't blame the trainer, I didn't blame the weight room, I didn't blame my parents. Like, I kind of went, hey Andrea, I think you need to kind of get your shit together, right? And just figure it out. And I did, and I did. And the year I probably was most successful was that last year when I came fifth at the outdoor meet. And I remember just thinking like, all right, you know what? Like, this is what I want to do. I want to be an All-American. I want to make the NCAA final. I know I'm capable of it, but I might come up short. That's where that whole thing of like, I just want to walk out of here at the end of the day. And if I come up short, I'm not saying I'm not going to be disappointed because I am. And that's okay, right? But I want to walk out here and look myself in the mirror and say I did everything I could do, right? And that is really what was the catalyst for me really starting to get it, right? And make my first NCAA indoor meet the year before, and it just started to click. And that's everything, right? At the end of the day, I can't control how fast other people run. I can't control, whether they're a great kicker, blah, blah, blah. The only thing I can control and the only thing I can guarantee, and the athletes on my team who've ever run for me, who might be listening to this, I know you've heard me say this. The only thing you can guarantee is you're going to give it everything you got, right? That's it. When you're standing on the start line, you should be able to center yourself, with like, look, like at the end of the day, I'm going to give it everything I got. And so if you beat me, then hats off, right? Now that doesn't mean, I'm not going to try to beat you the next time, you know. But yeah, I just think leaning into that was really transformative for me as an athlete. And so, I guess that's pretty autobiographical to use a phrase from Martin Smith, But and not every athlete's, is me, but I have found that a lot of athletes can lean into that really effectively, and it works.
What are some of the biggest things you learned as an athlete? You shared some of them there with me, but any others off the top of your head that you take with you now as a coach?
Um, gosh, if I could only have known at the time how inconsequential one shitty workout, was, or like two runs where you like cross trained, or, the 5 days you had the flu, like, I just think that sense of panic we can get sometimes, or like, oh my God, I missed 4 days of training, like all is lost. When you step back, and that's why there's this saying I love, look, you got to see the forest from the trees. And is this workout, when you step back 3 or 4 months from now when we're at the NCAA regionals or whatever, you're going to laugh that you made such a big deal of this, right? So I, looking back, wish I could have had that perspective while I was running. And so, what I tell the athletes now is, when you're unsure of whether you should run because you've got this niggle when you wake up or whatever it may be, I want you to think of what you would tell your teammate. Like, what advice would you give your teammate? And that's what you should do, because we're great at being reasonable with our teammates. We're great at reminding our teammates, look, hey, this is just one workout, like no big deal, like don't sweat it. Sometimes you got to punch in, punch out, right? It's not going to be the sexiest workout. Um, and so those things you say to your teammate, make sure you're saying those things to yourself. And that's the one takeaway, I wish I'd had perspective of that sooner. Like, you're just going to have bad days sometimes. It is what it is.
I think there's so few, I don't know the number, you might, but so few female directors of cross country and track and field in the NCAA. What's it like to be one of them? And also, you've mentioned this in a few of your responses, like you want to give back to the sport. What's it like to kind of be one of those leading the charge of doing this thing and doing it very, very well?
Well, I think the best thing is seeing, right now there are these women coaches, many of which I count as close personal friends of mine, and being able to celebrate their success, is as rewarding and as fun for me as it is my own. I think getting to the point as a female coach in this business of truly, not just tweeting like, oh, congratulations, Lori, on another great championship. It's like those genuine behind the scenes friendships. I've got a text thread which with a number of these, I call them ass kicking women, um, that I feel like there's a lot of support, and it's not, on social media, and it's not flashy, but it's there, and I think that's felt great for me. I hope it feels great for them, where you really feel like you have this network. I've got some great male coaching friends too, for sure, that I love, that I rely on as friends and mentors. But my network of female coaches, is tight, and it's really rewarding. And I'm actually really proud of those relationships, and just kind of how we have just kind of really been there for each other, and really been each other's biggest cheerleaders. And I think that matters.
How would you personally define the word coach?
Oh, well, I think it's, God, that's a good question. How would I define coach? God, sometimes it feels like being all things to all people, but you know, honestly, this is gonna sound hokey, but it is a lot like parenting, right? Some days you are there to be their cheerleader, and some days you're there to uplift them, and some days, I'm an awkward hugger, surprisingly. So, like, maybe not hugging, but some days you're there for the tears, and other times it's your job to say no, like, I'm sorry, but I expect more from you, and I expect more from you because I know what you're capable of, right? And sometimes it's to lay down the law and to make them be uncomfortable, to challenge them to be uncomfortable, and to do hard things, not to fall into some cliches. But for me, coaching, the role is, yeah, I write workouts, right? But I think that's the easy part. you know it's really about figuring out how to get through to a kid. And honestly, I'm not always successful, right? There's always those athletes you think back to and say, God, like, I just couldn't ever figure out how to click with that particular kid. And that's a bummer, right? That's something I'm disappointed in. So for me, coaching is such a broad term, and it means so many things. But there are people who think it's like, hey, they're more professional than me, in the sense that, like, hey, I'm here for this 2-hour block at practice, and I'm going to give you your workouts, and we might meet and talk about strategy, maybe that's my weakness, but my lines are pretty blurry, with that, where it's like, you know, I think part of the reason that I feel I'm a pretty emotional coach. So like, you know, when I had a girl finish 13th and not make the NCAAs one year as a super senior, she's crying, I'm crying, like, but I'm telling her, look, I'm so proud of the effort you put in and everything you've done here and the legacy you leave here at Toledo. Like, that's gonna stay. Like, that's coaching right there. Those moments, me and that gal are still in touch a lot. We're truly transitioned to friends now. That's such a cool thing.
As someone who is such a successful athlete yourself, as well as, through your different coaching roles, having the ability to be around such successful individuals and runners, what would you say, what does it take to be great at the sport of running?
I think you gotta have a short-term memory. You've probably heard that before, but we forget that. You gotta let the bat. You're gonna some days it just God, But I do think it's a certain ability. I have used this phrase a lot lately. It's an ability to handle the moment, and so like you wake up the day of the NCAA championships and God, your throat's a little sore, you go up for your shake, you don't feel great, and what are you gonna do, right? Like it's here. Today's the day. Maybe that's the Olympic trials, right? Maybe that's the conference meet. Like, we don't get to push off or postpone. And great athletes, I think, find a way. They rise up. May not be their greatest day, right? Maybe they're favored to win and they end up 12th, and it's whatever it is. But you know, you put your head down and you go, okay, like God, it might be a little ugly today, right? you know, but I'm gonna find a way. I'm gonna find a way to contribute to my team, or I'm gonna God damn it type thing. Sorry, you could edit that out. Gosh darn it, like I'm gonna do everything I can, And so yeah, I think athletes who can handle the moment, we all know of athletes, and we all have been there probably ourselves, where we can run great when maybe the moment isn't that big, but it's handling the nerves and expectations, and pressure. God, I hate that word so much. People, it's so loaded, but like, yeah, yeah. Frankly, handle the moment, right? Step up there and get it done. I mean, that's what it comes down to.
Coach McDonough, I've loved my conversation with you. One final question for you. I'm excited to ask it to you because you mentioned you do cookouts quite frequently. So the final question I ask every single guest on every single podcast is, if you had Gordon Ramsay coming over to your house for dinner, what would you personally choose to make for him?
Um, it would come out of a box or a bag, or like I would take a frozen lasagna and try to pass it off as my own, because I am a terrible, terrible cook. I do no cooking unless it's like pre-made and I heat it up. So my husband or Coach Zach does the grilling, and I just assemble really pretty dessert plates and fruit bowls. Like, if Gordon Ramsay came to my house, I would bribe my neighbor to come over and cook something for me. That's the truth.
I love it. Coach McDonough, really appreciate all the things you're doing for the sport and our conversation today. Keep crushing it, and know my full support in the years to come.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.